Hello, thank you for joining us today for our webinar brought to you by the Mexican Manufacturing Association Index. My name is Joshua Rubin, and on behalf of the Index and Shelter Committee, we'd like to present to you our webinar titled Lessons Learned CEO Insights for Manufacturing in Mexico. We hope you learn a lot and have something to take home for each of your companies. Next slide, please. This is our agenda for today. What we'd like to go over with you is what is Index, what is the Shelter Committee, an explanation of the shelter model. Then we'd like to go into our CEO panel and so that you can hear experiences from the companies that are already here in Mexico. And finally, we'll end off with a Q&A session. Here in the Q&A section, you can ask a question to two of the members of the Shelter Committee, or you can ask a question directly to the CEO panel. We do ask that you start sending your questions in early. If a question that you asked is not answered, please know that we will get back to you at the end of the webinar and answer your question. Next slide, please. What is Index? Index, the Export and Manufacturing Industry Association, is an association comprised of 21 different individual associations. Over 1,200 companies are registered amongst these associations and represents over 2.5 million employees. Next slide, please. Our association looks out for the best interest of all those involved with the export and manufacturing of goods. Some things Index does for us is conducts analysis and studies on the EMIX environment, work with state and federal governments on law regulation changes, as well as help companies if they encounter any challenges or issues while they're here in Mexico. Index also works as a consulting body for the government in many different capacities. Next slide, please. Index is made up of 18 committees, one of which is the main driver of foreign direct investment for the country, and that is the Shelter Committee. Next slide, please. The Shelter Committee is currently comprised of 9 shelters with over 200 clients, more than 70,000 employees working for our clients, and we currently have over 19 million square feet rented of industrial space. The shelter companies understand manufacturing and the needs of our clients. We are experts in helping you open up operations, being that the majority of the companies that establish here in Mexico start underneath the shelter. The Shelter Committee was formed to promote investment into Mexico, as well as work on challenges that are placed before us. This is that we are able to form a unified group. Because of the size of each individual shelter company, we have been able to form great relationships with our local governments to combat challenges placed before our clients. We will guarantee you that your project will be in full compliance with all laws and regulations. As a committee, we are here to help you and grow and expand your operation in Mexico. Next slide, please. This is a list of our current members of the Shelter Committee and industries of our countries and the countries of our clients. I would like to now turn it over to my friend and colleague, David McQueen, who will go over and give you a better understanding of the shelter model and how this model will help you be successful in Mexico. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Joshua. What I'd like to do just before I talk about the shelter model specifically is I'd like to mention some of the challenges that are facing manufacturers and some of the reasons why Mexico might be a good solution to some of those problems. Could I have the next slide, please? There's a lot of challenges facing manufacturers globally right now. First of all, rising manufacturing costs in China. Recent studies have shown that costs for unskilled laborers in China, fully fringed, can be as much as 35% more than they are in Mexico. And for manufacturing engineers, the difference is about 25%. In addition to that, transportation costs have exploded in recent months. There are trade barriers, including tariffs, but there are also disruptions from things like COVID and natural disasters facing that long supply chain to Asia. Labor shortages and an aging workforce are becoming an increasing problem. China has an entry cohort into their labor force that's roughly equal to the retiring cohort. So there's no expansion of the labor force. In fact, there's a slight decline. That's not the case in all places, though. Customer demands for local supply can put pressure on you. The same way that you're facing challenges in China, your customers are facing challenges, and they can be placing pressure to resource and reshore. And finally, the cost of managing an Asian supply chain is significant. Not only is there the time difference, it's difficult to get personnel back and forth, and there's that long supply chain again. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you've joined us because you're wondering if Mexico is a good alternative. It certainly is. There's a number of points in Mexico's favor. First of all, very open to foreign investment. Foreign corporations can own 100% of Mexican corporations in most industries, and they can own as many corporations as they want. Secondly, Mexico is a member of the USMCA, which gives them unprecedented access to the North American free trade environment. But in addition to that, Mexico has more free trade agreements than any other country. So the ability to source and supply anywhere in the world can't be better than it is in Mexico. The business culture in Mexico is very similar to that in the United States. So for most countries, Western Europe and North America are going to find it very easy to do business in Mexico and very familiar. There's a shared border with the United States. Now that's obvious, but that provides not only better logistics, it also provides opportunities for trade back and forth that wouldn't otherwise exist. And finally, Mexico is integrated with the North American economy, so there are trade opportunities there. But the most important point probably is that the costs in Mexico are significantly lower than they are in China in most industries. Next slide, please. So how do you go to Mexico? Well, most people would probably think, first of all, of subcontracting, if that's the kind of relationship you have in Asia right now. And that's certainly possible in a number of cases in Mexico, but in many instances, there aren't the same number, in fact, may not be any of the kinds of subcontracting manufacturers that are available in China. The point of sale, ready for sale kind of fully assembled contract manufacturing is relatively rare in Mexico. So you might find sub-tier suppliers, but not that completed product. It's definitely an option for some companies, but it may not be feasible in other cases. So then what do you do? Well, you can look at joint venture or acquisition. Mexico is quite open to those alternatives for foreign investors. But once again, the question of targets comes up. It's in the same way that subcontractors aren't necessarily available. There aren't necessarily joint venture or acquisition targets. So if none of those options work, what do? Well, you need your own operation. And there are two ways you can do that in Mexico. You can incorporate, or you can choose the shelter option. Next slide, please. The primary difference between incorporation and the shelter is that the shelter does not require you to have permanent establishment, whereas a corporation does. The directors and shareholders of the corporation are directly liable to the Mexican government for legal and regulatory compliance. In the case of the shelter, they're not. The shelter provider is. Both companies, or both types of companies, will pay corporate tax. But in the case of the shelter, you are not the legal employer of record, you're not the legal importer of record, and you don't have direct liability. One difference is that you can't own property in Mexico directly through your shelter entity. Instead, you can own it through your foreign entity, or you can own it in other ways by setting up an individual corporation, but you cannot directly own property. You do control your operation, though. It's not a contract manufacturing relationship. You manage the operation in Mexico the same way you would any other subsidiary that you have anywhere in the world. Both corporation and shelter can be EMEX. These are the kinds of entities that are allowed to take advantage of the EMEX program, which is the program that allows exporting companies to avoid or to recover value-added tax that they pay. If you need to do non-EMEX activities, then in the case of the corporation, you'll either need to find another entity or you will need to create another corporation for that purpose. In the case of a shelter can only be EMEX. So companies with EMEX shelters who want to do non-EMEX activities also need to create a corporation for that purpose. Finally, the legal structure is different. For an incorporation, it's an Incorporation Act as it is in most other countries, and the same kinds of entities exist. In the case of a shelter, though, it's based on a contract. Can we see the next slide, please? Now, you may be wondering how the control works. I've said that you control your operation. How does that work? Well, all of these green boxes, which relate to operating activities, are directly under your control, as they would be in any other factory or operation that you own anywhere in the world. The white boxes are the things that the shelter will do. Some of these things they have to do because they have the responsibility for permanent establishment. For example, paying taxes, enrolling people in the social service programs, completing import-export documentation. Other things are administrative services that shelters offer to make it easier to operate in Mexico. And in fact, most shelters will allow you to subcontract to them all of your requirements for administrative activities in Mexico. Next slide, please. In a similar way, the contract relationship and the creation of the legal entity is very simple. You choose a shelter provider, and I've shown the contract as a US contract, but it doesn't need to be. It could be a Mexican contract as well. But you choose a shelter provider, you negotiate a contract with them, and that contract forms the basis upon which the Mexican government can then hold the shelter company liable for legal compliance and allow the foreign corporation to operate in Mexico without permanent establishment. The shelter company will have an entity in Mexico that's appropriately registered to provide EMEX and to provide the shelter services, and that's the unit that's responsible to the Mexican government. Once this is in place, the foreign corporation can set up a Mexican manufacturing unit. They'll control it fully, and they direct the shelter company to provide them with the specific services they need or that they can't do because they don't have permanent establishment. Next slide, please. The shelter offers a lot of benefits. One big one is quick startup. Obviously, the infrastructure and the processes are in place already, as well as the resources. But in addition to that, the number of permits and steps required to get started are significantly less than incorporation and take much less time. You get access to expert assistance. The shelter is going to have multitude of resources who are experienced and knowledgeable in all of their areas of operation. There's no learning curve. You reduce your Mexican legal or regulatory exposure by not having permanent establishment and by having experts who are going to managing your risk. You have the option to transition to incorporation. So choosing a shelter does not cut off the option of moving to an incorporation at a later date. And in fact, most shelters will help you plan that transition and help you make it at any time that you want. There's lower investment in operating costs because the shelter already has infrastructure, resources, and processes in place. And a big one is that there's economies of scale. The shelter is providing services to a number of clients, and therefore they can achieve economies of scale that simply aren't possible in a standalone operation. And in many cases, these have significant bottom line benefits. Finally, you retain complete control of your production-related and operating activities, and the shelter provider is providing you a service under your direction, your policies, your procedures. Okay, before we move on, I would like to just quickly conduct a poll. We'd like to know from a choice of options, what the main reason why your organization is looking at Mexico right now. So the four options are tariffs and avoiding tariffs, proximity to your customers, reducing labor costs, and customer demand. If you could choose one of these four options, what best represents why your company is considering Mexico at this time, we'll give you the results at the end of the Q&A session. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to choose those, and then I'd like to introduce Renee. Okay, let me introduce Renee Espinoza, who will moderate our client presentations. Renee has more than 18 years of experience in the chemical processing and surface finishing industry for metal and aluminum parts. He has a master's degree in project management and is currently directing metal finishing companies' operations in Chihuahua, Mexico. Renee's experience includes supply chain integration and development, 5 years leading the Chihuahua Aerospace cluster, and recently he was appointed president of the Mexican Federation of Aerospace Industries. He is a member of the board of directors of Index Chihuahua and a founding member of the Mexican Association of Surface Finishing. Renee?
Thank you, David. Thank you for the introduction. As we have learned from David's presentation, the shelter program, or the shelter, is a model that allows you to establish your operation in Mexico in a flexible and safe way. It doesn't matter really which type of sector or industry you're in, where you want to establish in Mexico, or with how many employees you want to start the operation. The shelter will allow you to start, develop, and grow your business in Mexico. And today, we're going to listen to 4 panelists that are CEOs and directors of successful operations that are already established and operating and continue developing their business in Mexico. Our first panelist, can we have the slide? I'm going to introduce my first panelist. And is Welking Hua. She's a general manager, assistant, and business strategy development manager for BUT Industries. She's responsible for the operation of BUT International Trading Company, a subsidiary of BUT in international business development. Welking joined BUT team in 2010 as a market support and supported business management with Caterpillar. She started to join the leadership team in 2018 to launch an investigation of having presence in North America. She has personally supported the setup of its subsidiary in the US and a facility in Monterrey, Mexico. Welking's now based in headquarters in China and leading the business expansion for Mexico. And well, Welking, please tell us your journey and what you're doing in Mexico and how this has been your experience of operating under a shelter. Thank you, Welking.
Well, thank you, Renee, for the introduction. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Welking, and I'm from the company named Xuzhou BUT Construction Machinery Joint Stock Company, which is in the city of Xuzhou of Jiangsu province of China. And I'm pretty honored to attend the webinar today and very glad to introduce our company and our experience with shelter to you all. First, it's about a brief introduction of our company, what we do in China and Mexico. Well, Xuzhou BUT was established in the year of 1994 as the first supplier for Caterpillar in China. And our collaboration with Caterpillar has been lasting for 27 years since then. We're now a strategic supplier for them globally, but we also have the other customers like Skyjack, which is the high lifting machine manufacturer in Canada, and Epiroc, which is a Swedish company manufacturing mining machines. Our major products are the work tools and the fabricated parts for excavators, wheel loader, earth moving machines, large mining machines and trucks, and mobile access machines, etc. We have buckets for all sizes of excavators, from the mini excavator to the large excavator in the mining application, and shovels for wheel loaders, blades for earth-moving machines, as well as the hydraulic quick couplers and hammers. We also built the fabricated parts like the frames, chassis, turrets, power links, tracks, and so on. And currently, we are having 3 production bases globally. The headquarters is in China. We have 2 manufacturing facilities here, and 1 production basis, the subsidiary in Thailand, and another one in Mexico. From these 3 production bases, we are supplying our products worldwide, especially to Asia, Europe, and North America market. Well, we also have 2 services centers. One is in Canada and the other one is in US, which enabled us to provide prompt after services to our customers in North America market. We started our global footprint from the year of 2012, and our first overseas facility was founded in Thailand in 2023, and mass production started in 2014 there. It was a very hard start for us to have this very first step in the country outside of China 10 years ago. We bought land there, built our facilities, handled all the external affairs with local authorities, looked for local suppliers, recruited and hired local laborers, all by ourselves. The different rules and regulations, different labor laws, as well as the cultural conflicts were the biggest challenges we met. We assigned tens of people from our headquarters in China to Thailand to support the recruitment, training, labor management, production management, quality control, and financial management. We spent actually around 5 years to overcome all the challenges before we finally achieved a stable operation and fast business development. Well, then in the year of 2018, we started to study the feasibility of setting up production in North America, and the US was our first option at that time, as we thought all our big customers are there, especially Caterpillar. The headquarters of Caterpillar is located in Peoria. But after a few times of the field investigation and several conversations with local attorneys, and also the communication with the vice president of Caterpillar, we decided to turn our direction to the neighboring country, Mexico. We were prepared to repeat what we did in Thailand, but it was such a relief when we happened to know there are such an industry called the shelter industry in Mexico. This is totally a brand new concept for us and for everyone in China, as we do not have such an industry here. And I have explained this industry and how it works to many people and many bureaus in China again and again. This is such a great tool for the foreign investors. It expedites the startup and reduces our risks. Well, our concerns about the honesty soon cleared, and we decided to go for it. We then selected 3 top players in shelter industry as our candidate partners and started to touch base with them for introduction and business communication in end of 2018. We took 3 trips to Mexico in the first half of 2019, visited 3 cities as the candidate and also 3 shelter companies. They're all very professional with separate specialty. They provided all the services you can imagine, site selection, recruitment and hiring, payroll, labor management, administration services, accounting, tax compliance, supplier selection, purchasing, EHS compliance, legal compliance, importing and exporting, customs clearance, logistics, warehousing, public relations, foreign personnel relocation, visa application, etc. So as a factory operating in Mexico under shelter program, we just need to focus on our scheduling, business development, engineering, manufacturing process, and quality control. All the other affairs are handled by our shelter partner. With the help from the shelter company, we selected Monterrey out of the 3 cities, which is bordered our customer in the southern part of the US and has a complete supply chain base in the heavy machinery industry. Well, once the partner and location was selected, very soon we set up our US services company in mid of June 2019 and rent a building in an industrial park with the significant help from our shelter provider. As the negotiation about the leasing contract was so tough and it took several months, but our shelter provider was incredibly diligent and professional, and they were ready to take our calls and solve our problems anytime, even in the midnight of Mexico while we were at daytime, since we are in different time zones, and the difference is as much as 13 to 14 hours. It was not easy to have the conference call every night for several months, and even before we signed the shelter agreement. So I really appreciate what they did for us. Finally, everything was ready by December of 2019, and we assigned the very first team consisting of only 7 employees from China to Mexico. But remember, we assigned tens of Chinese employees to Thailand. We don't need HR, accounting, or purchasing personnel, but just the facility manager, engineering manager, quality manager, and the production manager. It was a lot easier to start up the operation of a factory in a foreign country like this. The first few months was also difficult, even it was a lot better than our start in Thailand. We had to work out the right process with our shelter provider and equipped the buildings with necessary machines and tools. And the most difficult thing was hiring and training. Our shelter provider has a database of labors for different positions from which we can choose candidates for interview. So everything was going smoothly. Well, we all went through a hard time last year due to the global pandemics. Our development in Mexico was also significantly stuck. After a difficult 2020, we sped up our investment in Mexico from early this year, as we were expecting a strong rebound in the North America market. And now we are almost prepared for the faster growing market. We have built more production lines, more machines installed, and now we have the full capabilities for fabrication manufacturing. And the total headcount now hits over 40, and only 11 are Chinese. All the other employees are local. We have successfully developed new products for our customers, and the factory will fully start mass production from this October. I don't think we could achieve this in such a short time without the great support from our shelter provider. Especially all this were implemented under a very difficult situations aroused by the pandemics. Now, more and more Chinese enterprises are getting interested in operating in Mexico, including our suppliers and customers and some partners in China. I have introduced the shelter industry and the EMAX program to many companies I know, and they all have the intention to learn more about the country and the shelter program. They can't wait to make trips to Mexico and launch the adventure. I believe the shelter industry in Mexico can expect a very promising years from 2022. Finally, I'd like to give my sincere thanks to our shelter provider again and wish a big success to our Monterrey facility as well as the shelter companies in Mexico. Thank you.
Well, King, thank you very much. It's such a great story, a great journey. And we really appreciate the effort for you being here with us, sharing your experience. And we know it's a big time difference. So we really appreciate the effort and for participating.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. Thank you.
Have a good evening. Our next panelist.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Mark Simmons. And Mark Simmons is not only a friend, but also a president for Arn Prior Aerospace. He is responsible for the Canadian and Mexican facilities. He joined Arn Prior in 2010. He's responsible for the strategic growth of the company and the establishment for global capabilities, including the startup he experienced in Mexico. And under his leadership, Arn Prior executes a world-class level for a healthy portfolio of aerospace and defense customers. He continues leading the strategic work, the strategic worth of the company, and he has over 30 years of experience. And prior to joining Arn Prior, he held the senior leadership roles for GE Aerospace. Mark, welcome, and a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of our attendants in the webinar. It's my pleasure to share with you our company, Arn Prior Aerospace, but also share with you our experience in Mexico under a shelter agreement. We initially started our business in Chihuahua, Mexico, just about 11 years ago. with a very successful shelter partnership. Next slide, please. So a little bit of an overview of our group. So within our group, we have 6 divisions. We have a forging division with 2 forging companies in the US. We have an aerostructures division with an aerostructures company in Canada, Empire Aerospace, and also an aerostructures company in Chihuahua, Mexico. We have a machining division with a facility in Portland, Oregon in the US, and it's also part of our business in Chihuahua, Mexico. We have a rapid prototyping business in Rochester, New York. We have an electronics business called Matus, which is in Spain, in Malaga, Spain. And we also have electrochemical 5-axis CNC machining doing aircraft engine, turbo blades, etc., turbine blades in Cincinnati. What you can see from our group is we offer a lot of services to the aerospace industry, but the aerospace industry is very, very competitive. So we needed to add a business to our group to enable us to be very competitive and offer, good value to our customer. So that is why we actually built our facility in Chihuahua, Mexico, under a shelter arrangement 11 years ago. And we feed work to that facility from all of our other companies. So it's a very powerful, competitive part of our group. Next slide, please. So the Empire Aerospace Group, really we have 3 main businesses. So we have one here in Canada, which is where I'm speaking to you from. This is our head office. It's around 165,000 square feet facility. And it's actually where our name originated. It's in a town called Empire. So that's where the name Empire Aerospace originated. So we do a lot of commercial aerospace work here and defense programs for the aerospace industry as well. We then have our facility in Portland, Oregon, which is our center of excellence for machining. We also do some fabrication and assembly there, also doing commercial and defense work for the aerospace industry. And then our company in Mexico is in Chihuahua, Mexico. It's under a shelter partnership, a very successful business. And there we're doing fabrication, machining, special processes, assembly. And we're doing that for commercial and defense aerospace industry. And quite simply, we reviewed many parts of the world to build that facility. We chose Mexico because of the free trade agreement, because of the excellent shelter services that are available, which really help you start a facility, with minimal risk. And because, it added to the power of our North American group of companies. Next slide, please. So I just want to share some products we produce in Chihuahua, Mexico. And it's really to share the skills that are available in Mexico and the excellent quality of work that is produced in our plant in Mexico. So we do a variety of products from detail components, sheet metal, machined product. We do all of the heat treatments and the coatings of those products as well in Mexico. Then we do tray on shelf assemblies. So in the aircraft, you often see on the movies, they talk about the black box and voice recorders and things like that. Those are contained on the trays and shelves. They sit on top of those shelves in the electronics bay of the aircraft. So we make all of those in our Mexico facility. Then we do some smaller assemblies. And then we also do some very large assemblies, including the one in the picture, which is a Boeing 737 cargo bay door, which we build in its entirety here in Canada. Next slide, please. Some more examples of product we produce in Chihuahua. So these are electronic structures that go into the aircraft. So basically, these are the power panels and the fuse panels that go into all the airplanes that we all fly on every day. And the junction boxes that control things like your seats, the in-flight entertainment. So many of these products are produced in our Chihuahua, Mexico plant, and they deliver direct from our Chihuahua plant to our customers all over the world. Next slide, please. So some capabilities that we have in Chihuahua. Our approach was obviously using the shelter agreement to help with a softer start for a new business. Helps with people, things like recruiting people and import and export and health and safety and everything you need to run a successful factory. But what we also did was we invested very heavily in new technology. We wanted the latest equipment, the most automated equipment we could install, the type of product we were producing. So it's all about using the latest, fastest technology in a part of the world, which is a very great place to run a business. So some examples of our capability from, forming through machining. Next slide, please. And then as we've grown in Chihuahua, we've basically added capability along the journey. So, as the team has grown with their learning and they've gone through our training schools, we've added more complexity and more technology to that facility. So we have in recent years, we've added 3, 4, and 5-axis machining to our plant in Mexico. And we continue to invest. The diagram there on the bottom right-hand side of the slide is a new machining cell we're going to be putting in Chihuahua towards the end of this year. So, again, latest technology machines offering high-speed machining in the Mexico supply chain. Next slide, please. The other thing we do in Chihuahua, we designed a business where we're able to do all of our heat treatments, chemical processing, and painting in-house. We do also have some great partners in the city for some of the processes we don't have in-house in our own plant. But we designed our model that way so that we were able to basically take raw material into our factory and deliver finished assemblies directly to our customers. Our customers really enjoy that. They have a very simple supply chain. They just order the top level part number from us, and we do all the work within our factory. So this is just a demonstration of the heat treatment equipment we have. We have a fully automated chemical process line in our plant in Mexico, a semi-automated paint shop, and we also do non-destructive testing. So you can imagine there's a lot of skills required to run that type of equipment, both from an engineering skill set point of view, but also, an operator point of view. So we've had very good success in finding the right people we need in Mexico with the assistance of our shelter company. Next slide, please. Some more assemblies. So we do some smaller assemblies. That's a picture of one of our assembly cells in Mexico. And we also do integration. So we not only make electrical assemblies that go in the aircraft, we also can install the harnesses and the LRUs and control boxes. And then the picture at the bottom center is the large cargo bay door that we build here in Canada. Next slide, please. So an idea of our customers. We really make parts for every Boeing aircraft, whether it be commercial or military. And, we specialize in the electronics base of all of those aircraft. We also do work for Bombardier aircraft, and we also do work on business jets like Gulfstream, for example. And we do a lot of work on cargo bay conversion aircraft. And then you can see a list of our customers, the main approvals that we hold. So we have Boeing approval, Bombardier, Lockheed Martin, Sikorsky, and Gulfstream direct to the OEM. But then we also supply a lot of product to, the tier 1 suppliers to those OEMs, large companies like Safran and Fokker. And it's actually one of the reasons why we also chose the Chihuahua location, was to be closer to some of our customers. Because obviously in Chihuahua, there's Safran are there, Fokker are there, and they're very big customers of ours. Next slide, please. And there's my contact details. If anybody wants to contact me about Empire Aerospace, or just general questions about Mexico and shelter arrangements and how that works, please don't hesitate. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for sharing your amazing experience and journey in Mexico for these last over 10 years now. Our next panelist is the CEO of Rockwell Solutions, Jim Gormican. Jimmy has more than 30 years of technical and business management and executive leadership experience in composites for the aerospace and defense technical leadership. Last 20 years, he has dedicated to the growth of entrepreneurs and endeavors focused on product development by integrating advanced technologies. Well, Jim, now is your time, and welcome. Thank you for being with us, and please share your experience and journey in Mexico. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Renee. My name is Jim Gormican. As Renee said, I'm the CEO of Rockwell Composites, and we're located in San Diego, California, and we have operations in Salt Lake City, Utah, Santa Barbara, and also in Tijuana, Mexico. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what we do and what we've done for a living, and how we use the shelter approach, and it's been very successful for us to date. So we're fairly new. We're 3 years into it. The main reasons for going there is provide customers with globally competitive pricing. We're an engineering and development company, so we were finding that we were developing product for customers, and then when it got to a quantity size for the customer, they would want to move operations overseas just from a globally competitive situation. And so really for us, it was keeping jobs in North America and keeping, the customer relationship and being able to give them the full service from development through a globally competitive solution. So by increasing our business, we've grown our jobs in the US as well as in Mexico. So a lot of people, I think, move, or my experience, move overseas to just reduce cost. For us, it was to grow our US business by having that capability. So next slide, please. Just to give you the collage chart there is hard to read. The first picture there, we're in San Diego, California, and our operation is in Tijuana. It's fairly close, so proximity is really effective for us. You can see a couple of the products. We make composite carbon fiber reinforced structures. So we do roll wrapping and winding and bladder molding in Mexico, but a couple of positive impacts on the side. Just retaining those strategic customers. In fact, our first customer that we had going into Mexico said, "Hey, we'll give you time to get up to speed and keep the price the same until you can execute, and then we'll talk about it a year or two down the line." And they've kept their word on that, so that's been really good. We've gained new customers because we have that capability. A lot of customers didn't want to pay for engineering and development if they didn't have a plan to drive to a competitive global pricing model over time. And with our Mexico operation, we've been able to do that. Again, as I said, we retained and gained jobs that would have gone overseas. Production flexibility. We're a contract manufacturer, so we change products and change items that we make from time to time, and just having the flexibility of an operation in Mexico is basically mirrored what we do in San Diego and Utah. Clearly, the logistical advantages for us being 13 miles across the border. We've found that customers will come to San Diego. We take them to Mexico to see their hardware. They're back that day and on a plane and out. It's been very effective for us. We have customers globally, but the majority of our customer base is US. The big concern in any business, or at least in our business, I'm sure in the other panelists that have been on, capable talent is always an issue, and we've found that we've been able to hire and retain the type of people that have the attention to detail and are able to make the kind of hardware that we do. And again, for us, it was a fast startup using the shelter. We've had some experience, not as Rockwest, but other senior leadership in our company that have worked operations in Mexico. So we were kind of already predisposed to use the shelter model. And by the time we finally got all of our ducks in a row, it was a fast startup. We were 3 months. We started in April 2018, and our first qualified part came out in July. So that was a pretty, I've set up a lot of plants in my career. That was a very effective timescale. So next slide, please. Just a couple more slides. So we make tubes and panels and sheets. It's using advanced materials. Most of them are carbon fiber. We do other materials, but we make lots of tubes for various applications. We have a portion of our business, which is e-commerce. So we sell basically composite lumber, tubes, plates, angles, clips, materials, etc. And a fair amount of that now has been transitioned to Mexico. Our business model is we develop hardware and all the tooling activity in either San Diego or Utah, and then we train people on that operation using that equipment, and then all of that moves to Mexico and then scales up. One of the great things we've found, and was a big concern of mine, was being able to get to the standard hours for processing. And I would say we're as effective in Mexico with the proper training and development with the people in Mexico. We hit the same standard hours that we do in the US. So very, very effective trained workforce when you lay it out correctly. Layup, we do hand layup. I don't know if people are familiar with these processes, but pre-preg in complex shapes, lots of different SKUs. And then we do some assembly for DoD drones. So a lot of what we make is for UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. And we make a fair amount of those components in our Tijuana facility. Next slide, please. Just a couple more products. This is the picture over to the right. It's called the Hans device. If you're into racing at all, it's the neck restraint. You can see the guy coming out of the burning car, I guess, but it's a neck restraint device that we make for Simpson. This is one of the products we can show and talk about. It's an advanced piece of hardware, and we make the quantity. It's very complex down there. It's made up of, I think, 64 different layers and components that have to be assembled in exactly the right condition. And then these are tested in a lot testing for meeting the requirements. So that's just an example, but that's a bladder molding process, it's called. But we make lots of different hardware, some for advanced antenna activity for Department of Defense. We were surprised that through ITAR requirements and customer acceptance that we could make certain hardware in Mexico, and that's helped us out quite a bit. So pre-preg layup to complex shapes, temperature controlled environment. We invested in the facility, and the whole facility is temperature controlled. That's not always how the composite manufacturing is set up, but we made that investment, and makes for a good environment, and we also control our process very well. Wet layup and preparation for painting. We don't do painting in Mexico currently, but we prep everything for painting and then bring it to San Diego and paint. Compression molding, infusion, roll wrapping, and assembly are kind of the processes that we provide. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of challenges and recommendations. I don't know, when people ask me what's the challenge in the business, it's whether it's in Mexico or in San Diego or Salt Lake or any of the operations I've been had responsible for leading. It's always about key people. We've been fortunate to have a great team that's leading our Tijuana operation. Carlos Arganda does a fantastic job. and then his team with the shelter company have really allowed us to focus on what we do best and make sure that we're in compliance in the Mexican laws. So I'd say key people is always the challenge. Make sure you got the right folks doing that. We have compliance issues with AS 9100. We are fully AS 9100 approved in Mexico, as we are in our other operations, and that allows us to move hardware back and forth. If we didn't have that, we'd have a much more difficult time. Our ITAR certification and requirements have been a little bit harder, but again, if you apply the right talent to it, we're able to execute that. Certainly COVID made things challenging last year. We had good support from the shelter group and consortium there to take care of our people with proper PPE, and we're allowed to basically keep working. I think we had a couple weeks of downtime. So recommendations: find the right partner, and the shelter experience for us. I mean, we're not an enormous company. I've run other businesses where we've had separate operation and shelter operation. It's a very effective way to organize the business and allow the team to focus at what you do for a living and make the hardware that you are committed to for your customers, and not necessarily worry about, are you in compliance with all the issues in a foreign country. So hire the right staff members, and if you can get people that understand the binational operations, that's been super effective for us. Again, we had fortunate issue with a couple people that were experienced on our side, but getting the right people in place has been super successful. You can see a little drone in the center there. We make a lot of components for those kinds of things. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Thank you. I'd recommend the shelter approach to anybody that's considering Mexico. It certainly can help you navigate the ins and outs of what to do there. That's a picture of our facility. It's a standalone building and all secured. We have a fairly sizable lot in the back for bringing hardware in and out. And I don't know that I have my contact information on here, but I think we've provided that to Renee. So, okay, there you go. I guess we do have it. Thank you. So if anybody's got any questions, Carlos is the one who runs our operation in Tijuana, and of course myself. No hesitation if you have a question, as Mark said in his response, please don't hesitate to call me. That's it, unless you got, I guess we'll do questions after.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for sharing your successful journey. I know aerospace industry is a very challenging with all the certifications, but it's amazing to hear that you found the right partner, the right people, and you're running a successful operation. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next panelist, last but not least, it's Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez, CEO for Optech Enterprise Solutions. It's an honor to have Lieutenant General, and he served after 33 years of service for the U.S. Army in 2001 as a commanding general of the 1st Armored Division in Wiesbaden, Germany. He deployed the division to combat in Iraq in April 2003. In June 2003, he assumed command of the V Corps and Combined Joint Task Force 7 with responsibility to support the Coalition Provisional Authority and led all combined military operations in the Iraq theater of war. He was the commanding general of the coalition forces in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was captured in December of 2003. After retirement, General Sanchez provided independent security consulting in Africa, Central America, Mexico, and the United States. Since 2012, he has been the Chief Executive Officer of Operational Technologies and OES Optech Enterprise Solutions in San Antonio. Lieutenant General, my pleasure and honor to meet you, and we are happy to have you here. And please share with us your experience and your journey in through having an operation in Mexico. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Renee. Well, some of you may think, what is a retired three-star general that's used to, in his previous professional life, all he has done is warfight. What is he doing running a company? Well, I tell everyone that I'm an accidental CEO, but it has been a magnificent journey for me over the last 10 years. I am the CEO and majority owner of OES, Optech Enterprise Solutions. We are a service-disabled veteran-owned and minority-owned company that was established in 2013. And prior to that, I had been the CEO of Operational Technologies, which is my minority partner in this endeavor. And we have sustained the standards that are shown there on the bottom right of my slide over the entire tenure that I have been the CEO of this operation. And even though we have done some additional lines of business, the key ones that have sustained over time have been the test, refurbishment, and repair of products, resurfacing of products, and value-added reseller opportunities that have come about, all of them in the telecommunications industry. Next slide, please. The location of our production facility is in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, and that is shown in the upper left-hand picture. But I have transload operations in Laredo, and I also have my headquarters that is located in San Antonio, and that's where I am today. The additional facility that we have in Nuevo Laredo is a warehousing facility that we use extensively to store product for our customers. The primary customer list is shown down at the bottom. And in the reverse logistics of test, refurbishment, and repair, our key customers are CTDI at the center of the slide. And then we're a subcontractor to them, primarily in support of AT&T. And our VAR customers are CommScope, Humax, and AirTies, where we're procuring primarily gateways and other telecom products for AT, and we're a prime to AT&T in that endeavor. We also do a considerable number of OEM support of other telecom OEMs by resurfacing some of their product. And we have a whole laundry list of SKUs that we resurface for them. From a reverse logistics standpoint, what we do primarily is we will take all customer disconnects from the United States, across the United States, are basically thrown into pallets, sent to us. We cross them through our cross-dock facility into Nuevo Laredo, and we sort, screen, and clean all of that product. And then we will run them through test protocols with testing equipment provided by our prime contractor. And if repairs are needed, we don't do the repairs internal to our operation in Nuevo Laredo. We will send those based on warranty status. We will send those back to the OEM for repairs. Those will be returned to us, and then we will go ahead and continue to process them through our reverse logistics processes. We'll kit them with we'll kit them with either new or refurbished parts, complete the refurbishment process, and then we will put it back into the telecoms logistics system. We provide serial number tracking across the entire life cycle of that product inside of our facilities, from receipt all the way through to providing historical serial number data for the last 10 years. At times, a telecom will want to know the status of a particular unit and how many times it has been through our refurbishment process in order to determine whether scrapping criteria have been met, and we're able to provide that for the OEM. And We will also, from a resurfacing status, once again, we're primarily resurfacing the products that are shown on the middle box on the right. We will test, refurbishment, and repair set-top boxes, gateways. On the Wi-Fi extenders, we've done reflashing on those. We work DVRs, modems, all of the items that are shown here. And we've been at our high water mark. We were able to produce over 5 million units in a year. And 2020, as most of us know, there have been some challenges in that, and those volumes dropped during that time frame. But we've been able to adjust to major projects where a telecom will provide us the test equipment or the reflashing equipment, and we're able to ramp up very quickly with the help of our initially with the help of our shelter operator Anilog, and provide the services that they need. Probably one of the items that is worthy of highlighting here, and it was brought up a little while ago in the last presentation, we have had tremendous success with the quality of people that have worked at the upper echelons of our production facility. I am willing, and I've stated this repeatedly in the United States, that it is world-class engineering and world-class quality that is produced by our all Mexican employees. I don't have any US citizens that are embedded inside of our production facilities. It is all manned and operated and led by Mexican nationals, and primarily industrial engineers. And that has been just a remarkable success for us over time. Next slide, please. What I want to do here is I want to share a little bit of our joint experience between operational technologies and OES in shelter operation, and how we have transitioned over time our production facilities and operations in Mexico. Operational Technologies was awarded a contract in 2007, and they chose to outsource production to Nuevo Laredo. And that very quickly turned into a significant challenge for them in terms of pricing, in terms of quality, and inability to meet production goals. And it was putting their contract at risk. So they chose in 2008 to transition to a shelter operation. And at that time, Anilog was selected as the shelter operator. And it was a remarkable change in the way that our operations were being conducted. The ability to focus on our production operation was exactly what was needed to ensure quality and productivity, while Anilog was taking care of essentially all of our back office support. And we started out with 100 employees in 2008, and very quickly, because of the excellent support and the ability to enhance our productivity and our quality, we moved to 500 employees by the end of that year, and quickly began talking about expanded operations in the West in order to provide support to all of our product that was coming out of California, Nevada, and that part of the United States. And we did a joint assessment with Anilog and decided that we would open operations in San Luis Rio Colorado in 2009. And that operation continued until 2019, when there was a major strategic restructure within our prime contractor, and we wound up closing the shelter in San Luis Rio Colorado. And at that point, we began at corporate thinking about the possibility of transitioning ourselves to independent operations. And in 2020, latter part of 2019, it was just a thought and a concept. And in 2020, we went into a pretty detailed analysis at our corporate headquarters to look at the feasibility and desirability of transitioning to independent operations. And it was very clear to us that it would be a significant planning and transition execution effort. And we finally made the decision in 2020 to pull the trigger after all the planning had been done. And we had set up our transition into multiple phases with the planning, operation, and building capacity, because we knew we had to build independent capacity before we could begin the transition of functions. And there were three primary functions that were critical for us. One was the personnel, obviously, and taking care of our employees. The operation itself, we knew we could sustain, but the legal transitions and governments and interfacing with government entities across the spectrum from federal all the way down to local, that was also a critical path. And then finally, being able to integrate and assume responsibility for all of the import-export responsibilities. Those were the primary critical paths that we had. And we decided to pull the trigger on it, and went into a phased transition between August and the end of 2020. There were some functions that transitioned immediately without assistance. Other functions, primarily those critical paths that I just described, those were done in conjunction with Onilog, providing, just superb support and being able to allow us to observe the operation, learn, begin the transition with them in oversight and assisting us as we took over those responsibilities. And that phase lasted about 90 days with working jointly and integrated with Onilog. And that led us to fully independent operations in 2021, in January of 2021. Overall, a really smooth operation with just tremendous support across the entire spectrum of shelter operations, from inception to growth, and then finally to moving ourselves to an independent maquila operation. So with that, I think that's my last slide. I will now turn it back over for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lieutenant General Sanchez, for sharing this amazing experience and also transition that I'm happy to hear that is successful now and fully operating. Please continue posting your questions. We're gonna continue in a few seconds into our question and answer session. As we've seen, the testimonials and experiences of our panelists from very diverse type of industries, very diverse operations. We've learned that the shelter is a model that allows you to operate safe in a flexible way in Mexico, that allows you to focus on what you are good at in your own operation, with the support of experts that understand the Mexican business environment, the certifications, all the legal regulations. In my experience, I direct aerospace company focused on surface and specialty coatings for aerostructural parts. And it has been over 10 years. We've been running under the shelter. And as many of you know, running this type of operation, the characteristics, the demands and certifications and permits are very rigid. We were able to start and open the operation in 3 months, and it has been 10 years of success by partnering with our shelter provider. And we grew from 60,000 square feet to 120,000 square feet. And we're about to finalize a brand new line for new steel processing that is not going to allow us to continue growing the business, but also to continue growing the supply chain in Mexico. So now I'll pass the controls to you, David, for the questions and answer. Thank you very much.
Actually, I think Joshua is going to start off our question period, so I'll pass it over to you, Joshua.
Thank you, David. So we did receive a question. The question was, let me go in here real quick to grab it real quick. How has the relatively new subcontracting law passed in April impacted shelter operations? If so, how? This is a good question. It's something that we wanted to make sure that was addressed during this webinar. The shelter model has not been affected directly by the subcontracting. The term subcontracting here in Mexico has actually been used ambiguously, but the shelter is not a subcontractor. There may be vendors that the shelters might use that would fall under the realm of subcontracting, and they need to ensure that they have the proper registrations with the government to be able to continue that process. That's the easiest way of explaining it. David, I'm not sure if you want to add any context to that one specifically.
No, I think I agree with Joshua. It's the intent of the legislation is not to limit shelter companies. It was intended to deal with specific activities some companies were using to avoid paying their employees their entitlement. Shelter companies are operating as they were before, and it's no change really.
Thank you. David, I would like to throw a question here to Mr. Sanchez. Could you explain I think you went into it a little bit into your explanation of your company, but can you explain what helped you and how successful and how easy was the transition from going shelter to independent and that whole process that you did, and go into a little bit more detail of that process?
Sure. Primarily, what happened to us is that we began the process of planning for the transition about a year plus out. And we started to work on identifying the personnel, human resource changes that had to occur. We had to look at all of the governance issues that we were going to have to transition, which they are extensive in Mexico. And then we also had a significant, I'll call it significant number of software integration issues that we're going to wind up transitioning that were different from what we have here in the United States. And being able to work with our shelter operator to ensure that the entire history and the proper and timely transition of databases was occurring, and just learning the requirements for interfacing in those critical areas of import-export and IMSS and with the federal and state governments, as far as all of the personnel benefits and requirements. Those were significant challenges for us in the planning phase to be able to lay all of that out. And then once we went into the transition phase, it was our own ability to stand up the capability to begin to train our people independently before we started interfacing with our shelter operator, and then doing that phase transition where we sat, we called it a right seat, left seat. The shelter operator continued to do all the functions while we observed and learned. Then we took over responsibility for the functions, and they continued to provide oversight and guidance and training while we executed all of those functions. And then even beyond those harder transitions, we also had the shelter operator provide us technical assistance all the way through December of 2020 before we actually took over and became totally independent. So the keys were tremendous cooperation from Onilog, very, very detailed planning, and then also the ability to find the qualified people and set up our own internal capacity to assume those responsibilities.
Thank you, sir. No, that was a great explanation, and for everybody that's still connected, that is one of the things that shelter companies are good at and help in assisting in this process. Some people want to open up with a shelter and then go independent in the future, and that's part of what we do for our clients individually as all the shelters here that are part of this committee. David, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, we have a question for Jim Gormican. How did you manage to install the equipment? Did you hire Mexican vendors, or did you install from other sources from the U.S.? How did you do that?
It was all handled in Mexico. So we had expertise. So any equipment that we were either purchasing or moving from another operation, we had expertise on what that equipment was. So we might have had a U.S. person on the transition, but all facilities, build out, electrical equipment installation, any of the TIs all happened out of the from Mexican contractors.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. And Joshua, I think you have another question from somebody.
Let me see. Yes, David, we'll ask you. What knowledge or experience does Index have with shelter companies that actually provide the manufacturing oversight along with all administrative functions as an option to the standard shelter? So I'm assuming this is kind of combining the contract manufacturing and shelter concept.
I think that's a kind of a complicated question, because there's a number of different ways that shelter companies do help with that. One can simply be to find and locate competent partners. And I know pretty well all the shelter companies offer that kind of service. There are some shelter companies who will actually do have their own contract manufacturing options. Those don't fall directly under the shelter model per se, but that option is also available in some cases. I'm not sure if that exactly answered the question, but there are certainly options out there. Let's see, just looking at the question here. It looks like we have one for Mark. Being part of a globalized industry, supply chain management is very important for the aerospace industry. How does Empire use its Mexican location and combine it with the Canadian location to make the supply chain more secure and reliable?
It's a very good question. So basically, it enables us, because it's all part of North America, it enables us to use the free trade zone and secure that supply chain in that area. So we have very good suppliers in Mexico. We have good suppliers in the US and Canada, and it's quite easy to move products across the border by truck. And generally, we've actually taken our supply chain and we've significantly shrunk it so that it is in North America. That, coupled with, we tend to do a lot of our processes ourselves in our own plants, has enabled us to shrink the supply chain as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Now I have one for Joshua. The panelists have mentioned that there's an excellent labor supply in Mexico. Could you speak to the training or other educational programs that are available for assistance?
Yes, of course. So usually when it comes to the labor market and what we're trying to do when we're finding employees for our clients is we'll work with the local colleges or universities and get them educated on what the type of people we need, as well as work with the areas and different types of what would you call it, educational institutions that there are, not necessarily just colleges or universities, but ones that actually teach them how to do welding, how to do contract certain types of machining and those type of details, so that they can actually develop the skills that our clients might need. On top of that, I would actually like to push this question individually to each of the panelists that we have here. I can start with Jim as to your experience and what you've found successful when you're coming and finding people here, and what has been successful for you. And then I'll go from Jim to Mark and then finish off with Ricardo.
I think we've certainly had some transition time for getting people up to speed. But the way our process works is we develop the the product in one of the US facilities, and then it migrates down there. So we know what the quality is, we know what the standard hours are, we know what the scrap and spillage should be. And so we kind of have a baseline when we go down there. I would say I've been pleasantly surprised. Is in any manufacturing operation takes some time to kind of scale it up, but we've done a pretty good job of being able to do that pretty quickly. So I would say the training and skill set is available. We have had some people that didn't work out perfectly, but that's in any operation. We have a pretty good team now, and again, we hit the standard hours that we developed out of our US facility. So if anybody thinks you're going to Mexico and you're not going to get the same quality, at least in our industry, not an issue at all. You got to have the proper training and documentation and tooling and that part of it, but quite successful in meeting the top-notch quality that our customers demand.
Thank you, Jim. Due to time constraints, Mark, I'll let you finish off your question here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. So very similar to Jim, we have a prove and move model here as well. So we prove the manufacturing method here in Canada or in one of our US plants, prove the tooling, prove the programming, the methods, and then we move it to our Chihuahua plant as a turnkey solution. But we've also done, in the early days of our facility, we used some government training programs. There's some incentives you can get from the government to train via local training associations. We did that initially. As we grew, our peak were over 500 employees in that plant. So we actually built our own training institute. So we've got our own mechanical skill training lab and our own academic training lab as well. And we cycle our team through those labs. But I agree with Jim, very skilled people. We haven't had an issue recruiting well-motivated, good employees in Mexico.
Okay, well, thank you very much to all of our panelists and to all of the people who helped to make the seminar, the webinar successful. We'd like to share with you now the poll results. Ruben, if we could have the slide up with the poll results, please. So as you can see, the most common choice there is labor costs, with proximity to customers being next, and customer demand and tariffs being both less than that. Thank you very much for answering the poll. I would like to thank everyone on the Shelter Committee. You'll all be getting a copy of the presentation. It lists all the members of our Shelter Committee along the top. Any one of these companies can help you with your needs if you decide a shelter is the way you want to go. We'd also like to, there you go, we've got a list of them there. So there's American Industries, Entrada, Credenza, Intermex, Evemsa, Javit, Mex Centro, and underneath the, at least on my screen, underneath the video is Tedakawi. So thank you again to everyone. Please, if you have questions, reach out to us via email or by the Shelter Committee's webpage. Thank you for joining us again, and we wish you well on your journey to Mexico. Thank you all.